Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the Beyond the Assembly Line podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hirsch,
I'm Sommie.
and as you guys can see, we are in a different space right now, but we still have a special guest joining us. And if you guys have been following the Beyond the Assembly Line Instagram, he might look a little familiar. David is the national recruiter for Aldi, and we met him at the UCF Career Fair, and we'll dive into all the recruiting secrets. So, Somi, take it away.
All right, well, I want to start off by saying thank you, David, for coming on as a guest for our podcast. I know it's been a few months since we last saw you, and we mentioned that we were going to be starting up a podcast, and we said, when it's time, then we'd love to have you on. And so we're just glad that we were able to keep in touch and have you on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I remember you guys made a great impression when I saw you guys came with some like awesome questions and some great energy, and I was like, okay, I see y'all. And then when you said you're going to have a podcast and stuff, I was like, yeah, I would definitely want to be on there. Never been on a podcast, so if I mess up, it's all good. But I appreciate you both.
No, of course, I'm sure you'll do great. Well, to start off with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you guys said, I'm David. I've been a recruiter with Aldi for about a year and a half now. I started my career years ago in retail management. So, right out of just like high school, got into that, and started working at some big box retailers and got into management. At the peak, I was probably overseeing around 70 employees at some of these organizations, and it was actually a barber of mine that was like, what do you kind of like about your job? What do you not like about your job? And I was like, I was working at, a big box retailer that also had like a warehouse attached. So I was like, being on a forklift at 3 a.m., long days, really not for me. But I loved like the people management side of it. I loved, seeing somebody who maybe wasn't like really an engaged employee and like, changing their kind of perspective and then them just picking it up and then get promotion. And long story short is I was like, maybe I'll get into HR. And because I didn't like HR, to be honest. So I always didn't have the best reactions with HR, but I was like, they're there to support us and they're there to as a support function. And I really just wanted to be that person. So for about 2 years, I was an HR manager, really, really enjoyed it. And then again, 2 years later, same barber. What do you like? What do you not like? And shout out to her. And I got into recruiting. I was like, I'm really not a big fan of the payroll processing, corrective action conversations, things like that. But I really loved hiring and recruiting. And a whole other story about that. That was during COVID, but then got into recruiting and have absolutely loved it ever since.
That's a
Wow.
great story.
Yeah, your
That's
barber
a
is, on top of everything.
Right. I know. I had to give her an extra tip that day because I was like, "Yeah, you're giving me some career advice. You're my career coach, but also my therapist." Shout out to all the barbers out there for for
No,
hearing us all.
definitely. Definitely. Well, today we'll dive a little bit more into your background and your journey into recruiting. What some companies are looking for college students and people in their early careers, how to navigate career growth once you're in an organization, and a little bit about your personal project that we'll dive into later on.
Absolutely, sounds great.
So you already answered the question of like what led you into the career of recruiting, but how did you get into your current role?
Yeah, no, great question. So I worked with Lowe's, and that's how I was able to go from a store side up into a kind of like a recruiting position with their corporate office, and that was during COVID. And I kind of got that was able to branch out of the retail space because during COVID we were one of the few companies that really just saw tremendous growth, right? Everybody wanted to install that flower bed in their backyard. And so everybody was working on those home projects. So I was very fortunate to be in a part of an organization that was growing. So they were looking for people very, very quickly. So I was able to join that organization and hop on with them. And quickly into it, I was like, I wanted to take on stretch assignments. And so I was able to work with, a couple internship programs. I was able to work on the finance sector, the tech sector, and really just right into it. And, the first couple of positions that I was working on were like, pretty substantial. I was late night on Reddit trying to even figure out, data science and software engineering and just like trying to be a subject matter expert because there's nothing worse than getting on with a recruiter and it doesn't seem like they even know what the heck they're doing. So really just diving right head in. First year of recruiting was just right in there trying to learn everything. We were hiring at a rapid rate. But unfortunately, that tech bubble, and so I was impacted by me and a couple other people with Lowe's impacted by mass layoffs. And so I went to another organization, and they kind of needed a jack of all trades within talent acquisition. So they needed somebody for their retail side, somebody for their corporate office, somebody for their international. So exact same thing. You're just learning. And I had an amazing time with that organization. Super fun, a lot smaller than Lowe's, but unfortunately, all good things come to an end. And especially when it comes to recruiters, unfortunately, HR recruiting, they're just the market has been really tough these last couple of years, and so there's been a lot of layoffs. There's been a lot of jobs that have been sent overseas, to kind of replace that. AI has been a big thing with that. So what was funny is, well, not funny, impacted by layoffs with that last organization. It really taught me a lot, about like myself and kind of just like my relationship with my work and things. And long story short is I literally went to Google and said, what organizations are growing right now? And Aldi popped up. And I was like, oh yeah, I shop at Aldi, and I saw that, hey, they're growing, 300 new stores next year, projected this. Went to their career site, and I kid you not, it was a supply chain recruiter. And I was like, oh, I don't have too much experience with supply chain, but like I have experience with high volume recruiting, supply chain, a lot of people in those warehouses, So I remember I submitted my application. I made it as much, supply chain focused as I could. And I reached out to like 10 people at Aldi on LinkedIn. And typically, if you send out 10, you guys know you probably get ghosted by 75% of them at least.
85, 90%.
I know, honestly, and sometimes they'll see it and you're like, can you just give me like an acknowledgement or something? And like 7 out of 10 reached out like the next day, and like, I'll tell the manager, I'll tell the hiring manager, I was like, okay, actually maybe not all of you guys. So it was nice because I was like, okay, like that team is on, they're online, they're engaged, whatnot. And so I had a first interview, second interview, third interview. Within 3 days, I had an offer. And I mean, that's like pretty rare just amongst any industry. So it really gave me a good candidate experience and stuff. And like, and it just made me feel good going into the weekend, like going from, being laid off to then having a role. So it wasn't something that I was seeking out, but I definitely had it on my mind about, potentially getting into supply chain recruiting, because again, with particular industries, it's really tough. It's really tough out there. And so I was able to pivot into, something that, a supporting function that is growing, similar to like healthcare recruiting and things like that. So hopefully that kind of answers your question of how I got into kind of supply chain and, where I'm at now.
Yes, it does. And I'm glad we got to meet because of it. So
yeah, no, for sure.
So this leads into the follow-up question of, what excites you most about helping students and professionals find opportunities?
Yeah, students in particular, and with my experience with Lowe's, just the apps, like the excitement of chatting is just so much, it's just awesome to see that excitement, but also to really answer their questions. When I'm on interviews, especially with people applying for internship roles, I mean, it's just phenomenal. They come prepared with questions they genuinely want to know about the workforce. When you are interviewing people for, let's say, a director level position, they've been in the industry 20, 30 years. A lot of times they don't have questions. They're like, how much PTO, what's the healthcare benefits look like, which are all valid questions for that particular person in that time. But, it's very transactional at that point. It's just how much money, they're not looking for a lot of times, this is a generalization, but a lot of times it's not as, they're not as prepared typically as an intern, which is crazy to say, but I was really surprised, and it really made me happy to hear about that. And I remember early on, especially just dealing with early talent, is having a lot of conversations where I knew on that call I wasn't going to move forward with that candidate, just based on various reasons, but we were able to have a 10, 15, even I remember sometimes like a 30-minute conversation about maybe kind of helping them what they want to do next, and, hey, you applied for a financial analyst position, but I really think your skill set would be here, here, and here. I'm going to hook you up with a recruiter for here. I'll put a good word in, it's not guaranteed, but maybe this, and this. Because sometimes after telling you a little bit more about the job or what it entails, some people are like, actually, to be honest, that's really not what I thought it was. And so having those discovery conversations, I think, is super crucial. And it's by far the most beneficial when I get hit up on LinkedIn later, or I see that notification that they got that internship that, they actually wanted, or they didn't even know they wanted, and it's like, oh, look at them now, or they'll message me and they'll be like, I'm so glad that you told me to pivot into this, just by asking some probing questions about truly what you want. What do you want at the end of the day? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, I think that that's like super beneficial. So that can kind of go for professional as well. Having those conversations, I think is super awesome.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I actually didn't realize that so many professionals aren't like as super prepared, but like it makes sense. It makes sense like the students are more eager to learn about the company and industry. So
Yeah, just excited. I mean, think about it when you were at your first, interviews and jobs and things like that. You're asking all the questions, all the things, and so it just gets us excited too when we see people excited to join an organization for sure.
Yeah, I remember for my first interview, I was asking like I did separate individual interviews with like my mom, my dad, my
Oh, that's awesome.
sisters, my friends. I was just so excited. I was preparing so much. I was so nervous for that first interview, and yeah, I was
Yeah.
definitely very much excited for that.
Yeah, excited, nervous, but I love it.
All right, well, let's pivot a little bit to once you're actually working in an organization, or when for you as someone that's working in an organization, what are some of the top skills and qualities that you're looking for in candidates as a recruiter?
Yeah, absolutely. I love somebody who is able to self-identify, and obviously we're asking a series of questions that we're trying to get at the root of specific examples of what you're doing, how you're approaching it, the outcome, especially, in like the engineering space, it's very project based. So was that project put on you? Was that project, how did you, pivot throughout there to just make sure that it was across the finish line, that you were, hitting those deadlines. And somebody that's able to, through their examples, really talk about self-identifying things, I think is really crucial, especially right now in supply chain. If you're going to be working in a supply chain, a warehouse or something like that, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees in there, and you have to be able to self-identify and kind of move through that, and just be tenacious. A really good mindset is also a really big thing. And I know some people are like, well, of course, you want a good mindset, but you'd be surprised. Some people, you ask about, some people that were influential in their career, or just talk about, kind of the hierarchy in your organization, or maybe why you're looking to potentially leave your current employer. And some people just throw their company under the bus, and they're just like, oh my goodness, my boss, we got a new boss. She's been here for 3 weeks, and I got to get out of here. But why? Or if the organization changes that I'm hiring you for, if they change, are you going to have that same kind of mindset where you're just like throwing the towel? I'm done. I'm gone. And so I think just somebody that really just keeps that positive mindset, and just be able to self-identify, just overall good communication. Those are just some of the things that really stand out to me.
Okay, and I guess leading it from that, what makes a strong candidate stand out? And also, what are some common mistakes that students and like early grads might make during the hiring process?
Yeah, standouts always a good one. And there's so many things that you could do to stand out. Um, and I want to be careful with what I say here, because when it comes to recruiting, you guys have been on like TikTok and Instagram Reels, right? And when you're looking for, let's say, just advice on like going to the gym. There's so much information out there, or just like dieting, or like there's so much like misinformation out there as well from people. And kind of the same with the standing out on a resume. I see a lot of people that are kind of career coaches, but maybe not recruiters, that talk
Mhm.
about standing out. And they say, if you use this resume template, you're going to stand out and you're going to get the job. And I'm like, it probably wasn't the template. It was probably that you interned with Meta or Google or IBM for 5 years. It's like, that's what got you the job. A template helps and things like that, but I wouldn't get too wrapped up in like tremendously standing out on things. Obviously, like the things I said before, those are going to stand out just alone. Good communication, the communication that I have to you when I set up an interview. If I ask you for a couple time blocks this week and you just say 11 a.m. on Wednesday, I'm like, okay, not what I was asking, but good morning. Hope you're well. Those first impressions are super crucial. And same with just, yeah, I get it. People are going to be nervous too, so that's why again I want to watch what I say, because I don't want somebody to be like exactly what David says is going to get me there. And but yeah, I just think being your true authentic self, showing up, asking good questions, questions that you genuinely want to know the answer to, those are going to make you stand out a lot. But I apologize. What was the second part of that question?
It was what types of mistakes do students or recent grads make during the hiring process?
Yeah, I think, and this goes across for anybody, just not really having a good understanding of what the job entails. And obviously, you only know what you know. And we put out a job description, and they're lengthy a lot of times, but they're lengthy for a reason. They're sometimes 2 pages, 3 pages, even. And I don't know, even if you just skim it, put it into Chat GPT and say, "Give me a summary of this role." It really helps because a lot of times it does say the duration, the pay. A lot of times it'll say, kind of what you'll be, the scope, who you'll be reporting to. A lot of times. And a lot of interviews that I get on, people will, ask those questions, which is okay. I don't mind answering them, but I would love to hear more genuine questions that you want to learn, or questions that maybe have come up during the interview. Hey, David, earlier you were mentioning, about kind of the hierarchy in the organization, and you mentioned, the warehouse operations director. Can you tell me more about the scope of business that they oversee, and are a lot of, this particular warehouse that I'm applying for, who is that person? How did they get in that role? It sounds like a genuine, question that you want to know, but if it's just, describe the culture, not a bad question either, but it's kind of hard to quantify, and it's kind of, what about the culture? Is it the work-life balance? Is it just the overall morale? So that would be, so I wouldn't want to say it was, a terrible mistake, but I definitely think that that's something that, make it just as much for you as it is for us, and make sure that you're getting something out of it too, for sure.
Is it a common thing to have people go through the whole application process? They eventually get the job, and then once they get on the job, they didn't really read the job description. They weren't really aware of what the role was going to entail, and then they end up having problems or even wanting to leave soon after getting hired.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a reason too. It's pretty uncommon, but it's also, it's our job as a recruiter to be able to kind of identify that. Kind of going back to my earlier experience, like with my last organization, this is an example that comes to mind. Is retail positions. Those are really tough positions. I don't know. Have you guys ever worked retail roles before?
I
No,
personally haven't.
only
Yeah, no,
serving.
but you go into a retailer. It's a tough job. A lot of these people are on their feet for 8 hours. It's just like the service industry as well. And when you're hiring for those roles, it really is an interview to you about those core principles we were talking about earlier. Being able to self-identify, being able to be on your feet for a long time, people management. How do you deal with under stress? You're getting hit up with all kinds of things. The fire marshal walks in while also you have 15 people on a line. The point of sale system's down. You had 3 people call out. Are you gonna crash out and leave, or are you gonna be able to be like, it's all good? We're gonna take it one thing at a time. We're gonna move forward. So yeah, it is rare, but it also does happen. So when I, have people on interviews, I want to make sure that they have a good understanding of what a day in life looks like, to my understanding. And that's, another job between the hiring manager and myself as a recruiter, to really get a good understanding of what is this person going to be doing throughout the day? How much are they going to be on their feet? How much are they going to be, working on a computer? What's the, the scope of business they're overseeing, the metrics, the KPIs that they're, kind of held to, what type of people leadership is there? And also tell me about the current team. What do they need? Do they need somebody that's really just going to be working right alongside them? Or are they going to need somebody that's going to take a step back, let them do their thing, and just really help progress them through their career? So yeah, it is something that pops up, and I think it's both parties. You asking questions, me, and you asking questions, and also reading, through the job description, and also me, portraying it correctly to you exactly what the job is.
Yeah, it's just as much of a interview for the recruiter as it is for the student. So trying to gather all that information, I do see why it's super important.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
this kind of goes into the next question as to something that you might actually hear a lot, but how can someone craft their resume that catches a recruiter's attention? Is it mainly specifically tailoring their the job description to that specific resume, or is it something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard this so many times amongst a lot of recruiters that I respect. A boring resume is a good resume. And what we want is truly just a simple, quick to read. On average, a recruiter spends 3 to 5 seconds just looking at a resume at a quick glance, not all together, but let's say I have 300 applicants that I need to get through. It's a quick glance, quick glance, quick glance. It's a pause. Okay, they have the experience. Okay, they have the experience I'm looking for. Here's a couple other things. Okay, let's look at their work history. Let's look at maybe some metrics that they may have. Let's look at maybe where they went to school. And then it kind of goes into that. But what can grab the attention? And if I see a resume and it's got a picture of you and it's got a list of skills on the side and it's got, a little bio and then a summary and then an objective and a couple other things, it just makes it harder, and some of those they're pretty looking, right? But when we're just looking, especially in this day and age where recruiters are, a lot of them are running thin, we just need that information very, very quickly. Now, I will, make a caveat though. Of course, if you're applying to maybe like a startup or a smaller company, you're maybe in marketing, architecture, design, things like that. Of course, you're going to probably want to make a little bit more standout things. But there's other recruiters that are tailored towards those kinds of things and how you can really stand out that way. But no, just get us the information quickly, briefly, how you'd like. And of course, there are other things I could talk about if you really wanted to like stand out, for again, like a startup or something, sending a Loom video of yourself to an email or something, it might work, but I don't want people spending a bunch of time for that. But one thing that you did mention is tailoring a resume. And I can't tell people enough, have a couple resumes, save those resumes, title them for what they are. For like instance, myself, I have a resume for early talent. So if I see an opportunity that's just for, hiring for interns or things like that, I have kind of my resume for that. I have one for international recruiting because every once in a while there might be a recruiter for EMEA that may pop up, and I have that experience and it's kind of tailored towards that. Just high volume technology, and again, they're very, very similar. They're just tweaked a little bit, but I just went into a little bit more depth about my technology recruiting, a little bit more in depth on that. And I think that really, really helps. And, if you have a dream role, yeah, you definitely want to maybe give it a little bit of an overhaul to make sure that it, and leverage AI to make sure it's grabbing those keywords from a job description to make sure that they match on there to an extent, of course, proofread it. But yeah, most certainly, those are just a couple of things and tactics that I would recommend.
Gotcha. One of my old coworkers, he was probably 23, 24, but what he told me he did was he has a long resume that's like 3-4 pages with every different project and all the different tasks that he's completed.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's applying for a role, he'll just pick and match and take what's most related to that role and kind of make his own resume based off of what he has.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. No, that's great. Because like I shared earlier, I have a retail background. Is that going to be relevant for a early talent recruiter role that I apply for? No. So I take that off, but if it's like maybe something where it's a talent acquisition, maybe like a project manager or something like that, maybe that might be a little bit more substantial, or leadership, because it's like, yeah, I do have leadership experience, a little bit lower, but yeah, that's a great idea. There's multiple ways you can do it. Have multiple ones, have one big one, but essentially, yeah, you just make sure you're tailoring your resume for the positions you really like.
Gotcha. And so, like, are there any big red flags that you might have seen, or just in general, that might cost someone a job opportunity?
Yeah. I know I kind of touched on them briefly earlier, and I did want to circle back to one of them. So earlier when I was saying about, really talking bad about the organization that you work at, I think of a few scenarios where people have done that tactfully. And what I mean by that is, if you're just going there and you are just lighting your company up, you're airing it out, you're telling me all the tea about the organization, and you're saying this, and this, and I'm like, oh, smokes, red flag. Because a lot of times it's unprovoked too. And I'm like, I'm not a therapist here. But also I understand, like, for instance, I remember I interviewed somebody at an organization, their footwear organization, and they were a warehouse director with them. And I said, you've been with this company for about 10 years now. What's making you maybe look to leave? And he said, over the last couple months, I've lost around 35% of my staff due to just reduction in force. So I've had a lot of difficult conversations. I've had to pull a lot of, getting on the forklifts and working alongside them and working third shifts and not being able to be there with my family and things like that, but I'm making the best of it. I'm trying to keep morale up the best I can, but the budget's getting tighter. And I felt for that. I completely feel for that. And I get that. And it's not really, it's an honest answer. And he's making the best of what he has, but he's also saying, hey, I think it's, I see the writing on the wall, and I get that, so don't say, oh, it's great, everything's fine. Because if you do that, then I'm like, well, then why are you leaving? If everything's great and fine, So yeah, I mean, just to kind of what extent, are you kind of saying those things? Another red flag is that, I've definitely been, approached and asked on interviews about things that don't really make sense for this particular position, or something that tells me, hey, this is just a stepping stone for me, because when I see somebody that is, let's say, under or overqualified for a role, I really want to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially when they're overqualified, and what happened, or let's say a gap in their resume, I'm not going to be like, oh, they were out of work for 6 months. I'm never going to look past somebody for that. But I definitely kind of want to know in the last 6 months, if you don't mind me, asking, or I wouldn't say actually 6 months, maybe a year or two, maybe just like, hey, have you worked on any projects, whatever. And, I think that a lot of these responses are really crucial to kind of helping you, especially, if you are taking a step down in a role. Because if you're like, I don't know, I'm just kind of, I'm looking for this role, but you did say that there's other positions that are opening up that are more senior, right? Like, potentially, I don't know, I mean, that's up to the organization, how we do finances, things like that. But that may tell me that you may not be as engaged if you come onto the organization and you're just kind of looking for a quick, job to get in and get out. You need to kind of explain that scenario to me. But again, most of those scenarios are pretty extreme cases, so don't think about it too much.
I have a question because I hear conflicting opinions about going from place to place. Some people say, as a recruiter, if you're in HR or something, and you see someone has gone to multiple companies in just a few years, it could be a red flag of, why are you constantly leaving? Are you the problem? Or some other people say, it's good to get experiences at many places, especially when you're early on in your career. See how different organizations work, see what you like. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. I love that, because it is a take. There's no right or wrong here.
Yeah.
So there is a recruiter on TikTok. His name is Mike. I think it's Mike Petita. I want to say his last name is. And he kind of defines himself as like a no BS recruiter. And I love that, because the reality of it is, I can try and be as unbiased as possible. I can try and do everything I can to, see the humanity in the process, and, understand, like, something like that. If you're 6 months here, 6 months there, 6 months here, I don't know what's going on with your family. If you're a caretaker, if you were impacted by layoffs, if that's not listed on your resume, there could have been a horribly toxic work environment. There's so many things that it doesn't matter to me. But the reality of it is there are hiring managers out there that may want to know, and they may be curious, and I have been asked by hiring managers in the past at other organizations that have said, if somebody has job hopped, I don't want them. And that's kind of where my job as a recruiter is, to kind of push back and say, well, what is it about that? Is it, if I have a really good candidate and they have switched roles, and over the last 5 years, they've had 3 roles. If I kind of get to maybe the why behind it, would that satisfy? Like, let's compromise, because what is your ideology behind that? Because I would hate to know that somebody has stuck around for it, because you guys, I'm sure, have friends that have done that too. And even myself have been with roles for longer than I feel I've outgrown them, or even toxic jobs. And I've just stuck around because I was told by my parents, hey, you got to at least have 3 to 5 years in a company. And I just think that that's not the way it needs to be. I think we can all agree that's not the way it needs to be. And also, if you really want what's best for you, your career progression, salary progression, all that stuff. But again, the reality of it is, there is going to be some people that may look down on that. And so I think that's why, like, even myself, I think the longest I've been with the organization was probably 3 years altogether. To some people, that's like, whoa, you really stuck around. And to some people, they're like, that's nothing. I've been with this company for 15 years, I think it's just kind of explaining that, on my resume, for those, unfortunate mass layoffs that I've had, I've put at the very bottom, impacted by mass layoff. So that way, if I do come across somebody that does look negatively, hey, you've only with that organization a year and 3 months, they know it was not something that I had anything to do with. It was just a reduction in force or whatnot. So it's complicated, but I think it is situational kind of as well. But hopefully that kind of answers. It's kind of my take on it. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And
So it like kind of reminds me or brings up another question. Like, do you think there's loyalty within companies? If I stay with a company for more than 20 plus years, do you think there's still a chance to be laid off? Or do you think it's more like, oh, he's been with us for 20 years now. We can't lay him off?
Yeah. It's funny that you said this. I was actually chatting with a gentleman earlier this week. I had a networking call with him, and he worked for 30 some years in the talent space and
Oh, wow.
really built up an amazing career in talent. And he was with a huge uh, ATS software system, very successful ATS software system for about 6 years, and laid him off. And
Wow.
he went to a small startup company. And so I asked him, I said, how did that transition go from going like 30 years in the corporate space to then going into a startup? And he was like, I kind of realized that the reality of it is, and I don't want to sound too dismal or whatnot, but the reality is it is transactional when you go into large corporate companies, and you are a number. A lot of people say, oh, your family, you're this, that, and the other thing, but I'm much more pro people than I am pro organization. I represent organizations, of course, and I really want to, know what's best. But nobody knows what the economy will do. You could be an amazing company with amazing culture, amazing tenure, but if the economy shifts, or if it's a company that does, banking, and they get hacked and all their assets, and they lose all their clients, it's just business. And so it may not even be that individual person, it just may be what's going on in the world. Kind of similar with Lowe's. I took it personally at first, but then I realized they were adapting to that spike that they had, and then that spike broke. Are they going to go in the negative for years and then me still be there and then them not be profitable, and make a whole other mess? So you really just have to be an advocate for yourself and understand, don't put your whole worth into an organization, whether it's small or large. Build your brand, your reputation outside of work. Work on those projects. If you're doing a large project at work, make sure that's for, you're taking it, you're writing it down, you're saying, I got this accolade, I got employee of the month, here's my metrics, here's how I can quantify what I did. But just know that doesn't define you at all. And I really hope that, I know that there are companies out there that really take care of those 10-year employees. But then I'll be completely honest. I do hear plenty of stories where people say after 3 years, there's no more pay increases at this organization, or after 5 years, you cap and you're done. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Because there's so much data out there that shows that, I want to say on average, it's like $10,000 or $15,000 on average. They should be increasing employees' pay to kind of match what it costs to bring somebody else new, have a 6 to 8 month ramp up period. The recruiters, the I-9s, the background checks, the training that the people that train them have to take away from their job, and I mean, there's all cost associated with that. And the average industry is, I think, 3 to 5% increase for full-time employees, salary increase, and it just doesn't really match what it should be. So again, a lot of this is quite broad and things like that. But again, I'm always pro advocate for yourself, and but also I would probably advise not to stick around for an organization for tons of years unless they really show that loyalty to you. If they're matching you by 10% or 8% or something, and you feel valued, you feel fulfilled at the end of the day, then stay with that company. But if you're like, they're really not doing much for me, they haven't paid out bonuses, there's really no career progression, go on,
Yeah.
please.
no, I
Try to
love that.
try to add value to yourself always. Gotcha.
100%, 100%. Yeah.
Well, transitioning from more college students looking for jobs and internships and things like that, as an early career professional, once you're in the organization and you're working and you're trying to grow and advance within that organization, how can early career professionals position themselves for promotions and future leadership roles?
Great question. Great question. I think the first thing is just really make sure that you are meeting those expectations. It's the job of the company and the manager or your mentor to really be able to tell you that. And besides just the, hey, David, you're crushing it, but more like, hey, am I really, adding value? Am I really, exceeding? What am I doing? First, kind of check yourself there, because I feel like sometimes I have conversations with people and, they're not even meeting those minimum qualifications for their job already because they're so new, or maybe they don't know, or maybe they haven't even been exposed to that yet. So once they kind of get to that role where they're very comfortable in their role and they're kind of on the bench for something else, then start to look at that. And you have to be a self advocate for yourself. And what I mean by that is when you're on one-on-ones with, again, your mentor or your boss, or another business partner or whatnot, advocate to them that you want to move up, but kind of also put those ideas in their mind of what you're looking for. So let's say you are in an internship and you're working in quality control, and you're just in that specific area, but you really want to learn more about operations, or you really want learn more about HR, or just kind of the logistical side of things, or whatever it may be. Kind of be like, hey, I really want to understand the overall organization more. Is it possible to go on a week stretch assignment, or even just a shadowing session with somebody on this side of the building? If you're not getting really what you need. A good boss, though, will be like, all right, I got you. I'm going to take you. I'm going to put you on a development plan. I'm going to do this, this, and this. But let's be honest, a lot of bosses are really busy. They have a lot going on. So kind of think about that. Like, what do you think in your mind, if you were your boss's boss, or even just, from your boss's lens, what would make you more valuable to the company, but also maybe for future opportunities? Is there something that you can do inside the organization that would help you want to interview in the future for another role? Again, you have to be able to kind of think about that as well. So you're not just sitting there building up this animosity, like, hey, I'm waiting, and there's nothing really coming for me. Because kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, the reality of it is, again, a no BS kind of reality is sometimes there is not that position, for you. Because for financial reasons, for the organizational structure reasons, for just there may be one role that you're looking for and that person's already been there for 30 years. So unless they're retiring or something, like, it's just not obtainable. So I think just really doing some searching of what you want, truly what you want out of that, and not just always waiting for other people to do the work for you. So hopefully that kind of helps a little bit. But that's just what I've learned from my experience, and I'm still trying to tell myself that every day,
No, I think that one thing I wish I did in my internships and co-ops in undergrad was, well, I made sure to network at the companies that I was at, but I wish that during my one-on-one sessions with managers and coworkers that I asked for more constructive feedback.
Yep.
Instead of just, hey, you're doing great, keep it up, or I wish I asked for more constructive feedback to help me grow, like help me develop, not even within the organization, but help me develop my skills as someone that's going to be entering the workforce. And that leads into the next question is, everyone says how important networking is, but how do you do that once you're out in the real world? Because in college, we're around a bunch of students, we have our professors, they hold career fairs for us to go to. But once you're working and you're not around people that are just our age, maybe we're working with people that are 20 years older than you. How do you go about networking once you're out of school?
Absolutely. We always talk about it, networking, and it is truly something that I feel is underutilized by a lot of people still. And I think, I want to say there was a statistic that said it was staggering. It was like 80% of job opportunities come through networking. That's crazy. And, the last three, kind of like I shared with Aldi, from networking, job before that, networking, the job before that, networking. And specifically how to do it, I think really utilizing LinkedIn. I get it. LinkedIn is a lot of times boring. You get on there, you see the same thing all the time. You see a lot of things that you're like, why is somebody posting about this?
I love the app. It's awesome.
Well, we can all be honest. My biggest advice with LinkedIn too is also shut off the notifications, so that way they're not bothering you at 8 a.m.
I see my friend's friend liked their friend's post, and it's like, bro, I don't have no relation to this person.
And then they send you emails too about, somebody has a post you may like. How do I turn this off? But no, LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool if you use it for networking, and several ways. I think this is going to be a little bit longer of an answer, but it took me a couple of years to kind of really figure out how it's most beneficial to me. But when you kind of get into the real world, first start off by identifying, kind of groups and alumni or potentially organizations that you really want to work with. So obviously, something like, in marketing, there's like your top 5. In the finance, there's the top 10 organizations. In sales, there's, top 10, 20 organizations that are really sought after work for. Follow them on LinkedIn, turn on the notification if that's something that, works for you, if they are, maybe remote, or if they're in your city or things like that, you can put in the keywords. Also, if they're on that top 10 list, sign up for their notifications on their career site, because not all positions actually go to LinkedIn. So a lot of times a position may just go on the internal job board and you may miss it because it doesn't go on LinkedIn. And once you start doing that, you can go to that people section and you can start looking, and you can, find people that are in recruiting or similar spaces. I think the top 3 people that I would target for an organization is obviously TA people, talent acquisition people, because they're going to be the first line. People that are in the same kind of position. So like for you guys, industrial engineers or, anybody kind of in that space, and also new people as well. If somebody is new or potentially an intern, there's a better possibility that they would actually be willing to reach out to you because they just joined the organization. And I've given that advice to several people, and it's got some people some jobs. And like a perfect example is a couple of years ago, a friend really wanted to get into this nonprofit. Nonprofits are notoriously hard to get into. And there was an executive assistant that just started, and we were looking through. I looked up, in the search bar, I was like, the organization's name and like new job or new position. One popped up 3 weeks ago. I said, reach out to that person. Hey, congratulations on the new role as an administrative assistant. Blah 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 blah. How has been your onboarding experience? How has that been? Whatnot. What was the recruiting process like? Right back. Was great. I feel, I'm getting the training I need. I have a great ramp up. It was all this insight of really, quickly of like, how is your process right now? Not 5 years ago on Glassdoor, but like right now, how are things? And, they were able to say, hey, well, if you see a position, let me know. 2 months later, there was a position that popped up, was able to reach back out to that person and say, oh yeah, well, by chance, who was your recruiter? Connected with the recruiter, and was able to use them as a referral. And so it's like a very roundabout way. It's an unconventional way, but sometimes you just kind of put in that hustle if it's a job that you really, really want. And so, sending out those invitations, connecting with people, sending personalized messages as well. If it's the talent acquisition director or the recruiter at that position that you really want, type up a little, like look at their profile. Hey, I see that you worked at, you also went to UCF, and I'm just graduating too. Happy to connect. Love the organization. It could be, quick and brief. You don't want to make it too AI kind of like, but it's personal. I see that you're an outdoor lover too. I see that you're a dog lover by your banner, whatever it may be. I think it really goes a long way. So just kind of networking with that is really super important for myself. Other industries as well. Some quick advice. Look up on Facebook events or any type of events that are out there for networking. So if you're in specific industries, that's really helpful to actually getting face to face, working with those people. Hey, are you open to a coffee chat? I just want to learn about how you keep your skills sharp. Any advice to your younger self? Ask genuine questions about, hey, you've been in that field for a couple of years now at a dream company. How can I kind of get my foot in the door, but also genuinely get some good knowledge out of this, So those are just a couple things off the top of my head that I can think of.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, I know you have a personal project you've been working on that, Harsh, you can get into that.
Yeah. The last time we talked to you in person, we actually heard about your personal project. Could you explain to the audience what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, coming from my background of going from retail into kind of a quote unquote corporate job and whatnot, I really have a desire to just kind of help those folks that, were kind of similar to myself. When I was working in, the earlier stages of my career, I really thought that I was going to be there for the long haul, years and years. And it's just so overwhelming, kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier with like trying to work out, right? You go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, and you're just like, how to get a new job or how to stand out. And it's just tons of people and it's different information and it's all like way too much. But it's like, you need to pause and look. If you're looking for like weight loss, what is in that person's profile? Is it like a coaching seminar for $15 behind a paywall? Or is it somebody who's a nutritionist or a doctor? Or is it somebody that has a little bit more substantial background? Same with kind of recruiting. Are they a career coach or are they a recruiter? And not saying that there's some great career coaches out there for sure, but, just kind of, giving people an honest approach to getting what they truly deserve. Because there are millions upon millions of Americans that didn't have a lump sum of money maybe set aside, or even the knowledge of how to get go to college and continue education. And so whenever I see somebody that is going from a retail setting, a service industry setting, maybe something that's a little bit more entry level, and they want to go into that next step, I'll reach out all day long to just try and see, hey, do you want me to help you build up a resume? Tell me about what you do during the day. And let's take, if you are a manager at a restaurant, okay, about how many tables do you see? About, on average, how many people do you, the teams you oversee? Are you doing corrective action? Are you overlooking P&Ls? Do you have any metrics, KPIs? Tell me about the sales, whatever information that you have. So that way maybe you can apply it to an entry level, like sales development role at a tech company. And I've seen people that have progressed from those smaller companies, or maybe it's, when I worked with Lowe's, we had a couple success stories where we had folks that, I remember one in particular was she was like a shift supervisor at a Walgreens out in California. And we were able to, she went to a software boot camp, really, really great. She was super knowledgeable. The kind of experience didn't line up, and we had an entry-level position, and she was able to transition in there, and she crushed it. She absolutely crushed it because she was so much more tenacious. She was so much more just excited to get into there, and also to prove herself, right? Because if you're going from being a single mom to working at, I'm sure probably 45, 50 hours a week at a retailer, from then going to a tech company making six figures, you're not going to let that go, and so you're really going to learn everything you possibly can. And it was a beautiful story to see now her in that position years later and just kind of grow. So I would love to get the project more refined where it does provide a service. I would love to in the future maybe have a website that people can go to and free use, and it has templates specifically for different people that are looking to break into different industries, or just even get them their foot started in creating a resume or interviewing, or what to think, what to prepare for, what not to prepare for, what not to waste your time on, or whatnot. But I think it's just super crucial that us as recruiters, we share that knowledge. We don't gatekeep it. We're like, it's not as crazy, and we know it's frustrating because when I'm on the market, it's reverse. It's like the reverse Uno card, and then I'm like, oh my god, I'm talking to recruiters and they're like interrupting me and calling, cutting the interview short. I'm like, oh my god, like this is this is why it's so important for me to genuinely listen and care, because I could be on the receiving end tomorrow, and so it is scary, and I acknowledge that. So yeah, that's just something that I'm very passionate about, and it gives me fulfillment outside of work for sure.
Yeah. And it feels like it's relating like recruiting and career development like all in one. So it's like, it seems like a perfect fit, and it sounds like a really awesome project.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then like the last question I have is, what are some key takeaways that listeners can apply to their own job searches?
Going back to networking, I think a lot of people sometimes I hear they say, I submitted 200 resumes this month, and I really think quality over quantity. So if you apply for the job, truly take a couple seconds to read through the job description. If it is 6 pages, have ChatGPT summarize it or whatnot. Leverage AI tools like Perplexity to learn about the company. Type in specific questions, and it'll give you, answers, and it'll tell you where it's sourced from. So, it's not just pulling it from a weird Reddit article or something. Claude is another AI tool that will help you if it requires a cover letter or something. It's specifically meant for writing. Those are all things to just make sure that you're taking a second, reading through it. I fell for this the other day. I applied. I didn't apply, but I had a friend apply, and it was for Portuguese. Like the language needed to be Portuguese, and he applied and everything like that. And I'm like, wait, do you speak Portuguese? And he's like, no. And I'm like, oh my god, you did a cover letter, you did everything. And I'm like, you have to slow down. We have to slow down because I'm trying to get him a new job, and it's like, so even I fell for it too. I'm like, apply quickly. But yeah, and then spending that 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes going to that LinkedIn page, looking at who you can connect with, sending some customized messages to, maybe 24 hours later, seeing who reached out. If you have the premium account, then I think you can just reach right out to them, which is great. But making sure it's precise, it's not AI generated, it's something that grabs people's attention. It's genuine, it's honest, it's something that, hey, and make sure you applied for the role too. I get a lot of people that say, hey, I might apply for this role. I don't have your information. I can't really pull it up. It's hard. Understand that a lot of times when you reach out to recruiters, they may not be that recruiter for that role. So just, hey, my name is David. I'm reaching out. I saw this, recruiting technology lead position I'm interested in. I applied. By chance, are you the recruiter for it? Or if you don't mind pointing me in the right direction for maybe who might be working on this role. And that's not me, but it's this person. Perfect. Go to that person. Or they might say, yeah, that is my role. Give your little elevator speech, 2 to 5 sentences that they can be like, oh, okay, cool. If you want to upload your resume. But if you send big paragraphs, again, a lot of times they're really busy. So don't take it personally if they just, pass or ignore or whatnot. But those are just some things that I kind of think about.
Very fair. Very fair. And, Sommie, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, we'll get ready to close this out. Do you have any final key pieces of advice for students or professionals? I know we've gone over a lot of stuff, but do you have anything to close it out for us?
Yeah. My last thing is just don't take it personally. Again, it's the job hunt, the applying for jobs, the cover letters, the everything. It is transactional, and the reality of it is I have applied for a lot of jobs and not got them, and I took it very personally. And come to find out, it was somebody with my exact experience, but they were bilingual, or very close to my experience, and they were like right next to the home office, or they had 10 more years. But it's hard because sometimes you give it your absolute all. You practice, you have all your notes set out, you practice with family, you do everything, and you just get that email and your heart sinks and you're like, what did I do? How did I not get this? And the reality of it is you could have very well done everything right. You could have had a 10 out of 10 interview, 10 out of 10 responses, but there was somebody internally that maybe was on the bench that got that role. And again, it's just the reality of it. And a good recruiter should be able to reach out and give you either feedback, or a good hiring manager give you feedback, or just let you know, hey, we did move forward with an internal candidate. However, their position's getting backfilled. Would you be interested? Or I know Q1 or Q2 of next year there may be a role. Let's keep this connection. And so keeping that network connection strong is super important too. But overall, as people apply for jobs, especially in this market, don't take it personally. Don't beat yourself up, and don't always think it's you. Because I've heard so many people that have been burnt out from just applying to jobs, and they're like, I'm not hireable. It gets to you. You think that, there's nothing ever going to come, and it'll eventually come. It's sometimes it can be a little bit rough, but
of course,
that's all I got.
That's definitely great advice. It's business, it's all business. It's not personal. And well, David, where can people reach you if anyone wants to reach out to you for any business inquiries, any questions about recruiting, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love if you tagged my LinkedIn. I believe it's like David M. Smith, but I'm sure a code would be easier to route to it, or you could just look up David Smith at Aldi. I'm sure in the search bar, and you'll see my smug face right there. So
perfect. Thank you so much, David.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much
for having me.
Mm-hmm. And all the best with your personal project. It seems like a great idea, and I really hope you succeed in all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And that wraps up this episode of Beyond the Assembly Line, and you guys can catch us next time.